MX bikes is really hard, but it doesn't have to be. Today I'm going to be going over 5 tips and tricks, plus a couple bonus ones, to help you get faster and more consistent in the game. Some of these tips are relatively advanced while others are somewhat simple, so depending on your skill level, you can decide which ones you want to try and apply in the game. I'm coming up on 2,000 hours in the game now, and I haven't done many guides or tips and tricks, so I plan on doing a few more of these in the near future. So, tip number 1 is kind of 2-in-1 here. It's how to case things and how to overjump things and still survive. The strategy for overshooting jumps is definitely easier than casing, but with some practice, you can definitely do both of them. When overshooting a jump, there are 4 things you can do to help you survive. The first is getting your front end up and shifting up. Then, as you land, you want to lean forward and be on the throttle. As you can see here, I'm getting my front end up, and then I'm shifting up from 3rd to 4th, and then right before I land, I lean forward and I'm on the gas. You can even be a little bit sideways like this clip here. Just make sure you get your nose high, you shift up, and you lean forward up before you land, and you're on the gas. Casing jumps is a little bit hard to explain, but basically you want to get your bike a little bit off axis, leaning to a certain way, and then get your nose up really high, and then sit down and scrub off of the jump that you're casing. I know it doesn't make much sense, but it does work, and that was a very extreme case of it. So you don't use it if you're barely going to case something. This is either a pretty big case to a major case. I would highly recommend studying the controller overlay here. The left stick is all of my steering, while the right stick is my leaning. My left and right is flipped, so keep that in mind. The second tip I have is about the camera view. This is very important, and whether or not you're a new player who is trying to decide which camera to use, or an experienced player that might want to change, I would highly recommend trying out all of them just to understand how they work. MX Bikes has 3 different camera views. There are 2 first-person cameras and 1 third-person. The first-person camera is basically a chest cam, and this is definitely the most planted one, but also the most boring one. And I would recommend staying away from this one and either using the second first-person camera, which is basically from the goggles, like from your actual eyesight, and it moves with your lean and is by far the most realistic. Or you can use the third-person camera, which is preferred by a lot of people that just like to be outside of the rider and see the actual bike more. For my first 1,000 hours, I was using the first-person camera, which is the chest cam, and I did not realize what I was missing. When I went to try out the second first-person camera, I was just blown away by how much more fun and more realistic it was, and I instantly switched to it. And I did worry that my skill might not transfer over and I'd have to relearn the game, but it was really surprising how well it transferred over and how quickly. Like I said earlier, depending on personal preference, I would use the second first-person camera or third person. The third tip I have is to place a checkpoint in testing whenever you are struggling on a section. Checkpoints are huge for multiple different reasons, but if you're struggling on a section and can't figure out, instead of doing the whole lap and then trying to remember like timing or what gear to be in and try to figure it out that way, if you're really struggling, set up a checkpoint and just keep running through that section and try to figure out how to hit the best, and you can figure out your mistakes a lot easier by doing that until you master the section. This also helps for if you're trying to mess with the setup. If you feel like you can't hit this section right, or you think there's a faster, you could hit it faster, especially whoops. If you're struggling in whoops, set up a checkpoint like a little bit before, and just keep running at them, changing your setup or changing how you're approaching them, try to figure out the best way to hit it. Number 4 has to do with keeping traction, especially in berms. In this clip here, I'm going to try to lean into this corner. I have a massive slide out. For this corner, it's doing that because it's kind of mellow here, and then it gets a little bit sharper of a corner, so the bike just compresses more, and then especially this is when you kind of want to get on the gas to exit it, and that's why it's sliding out. So the 2 things I would do is not lean into this corner, just steer it, and then be very mellow. Try to be mellow on the throttle throughout the whole corner and keep momentum. Don't try to like go in kind of slow or whatever and then try to ramp up your speed a lot. You're going to want to keep your speed. This is how to not hit the corner. And this is how to hit the corner smoother. Just don't lean and keep the throttle smooth. The fastest way to hit any jump is not a scrub. It's actually a front flip. With the front flip, you get your front end down as low as possible. You stay the lowest, and you're up in the air the least amount of time. If any of these tips helped you at all, it would be much appreciated if you liked and subscribed. But on to the fifth and final tip for today. Huge thing that even I struggle, I know this, but I still struggle with it, is if there are big lines on a track and they're at all sketchy, it's not worth it. Because if you're gaining, like, let's just say you're gaining like a tenth or two, one crash, fly over a berm, just have a bad get up, you miss the rest of the rhythm, whatever, costs you like 5-7 seconds maybe, like if it's bad, and then it was all out the window. Unless you can hit it every lap, the big huge lines are not worth it. And like I said, this is something that I always struggle with, because I'm like, oh, I can do it, I can send it, and then I end up dying once, having a bad crash on it, and then it's never worth it. Another little bonus tip I have here that I didn't know if this was big enough to be an actual tip, so I just decided I'd throw it in here. It is about the riding assists. So I thought I'd run through them and explain them a little bit and tell you if you should run them or not. So lean help is just a bad idea. It's gonna help, or it's gonna hurt you from learning the game faster and better, and it just doesn't work that well. Automatic shift, I wouldn't do that. I mean, you could if you're a very casual player, but I would definitely not have that on. Shift help, do not have this on. All it does is make it where you don't have to let off the gas to shift, but it adds a delay to it, to the shift. So I wouldn't do that. I think that's just gonna set you back further. Automatic clutch, everyone runs this. I would recommend using that. Traction help, doesn't really work that well. Don't use that. Brake help, it's kind of like ABS. Most people do run it. You can mess with that, but I would recommend using that. The automatic rider leans, bad idea. Automatic rider dab, I don't know. You could test with that. That's the one I really don't know about. Automatic rider sit, bad idea. How does the guy know when to sit? How does he know that? Automatic tires change, yes, have that on. I hope you all learned something from this video, and thank you for watching.
My love's like a black hole sun, so bright when it burns, so dark when it's done. So hard to relate to one when I find myself tripping off that blunt, tripping off this blunt. So I might be blunt if I do confront you. Don't run, no, don't run from the black hole sun.